All right, good day to you. Sam here on a Thursday, May 24th. It's kind of late morning. Getting a late start today, quite honestly, because I had trouble getting a count on this. So we pulled the members, and we've got a few cryptocurrencies we're going to review in video today. But one of the first ones that the members wanted a video review of is WAN. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, W-A-N, Wanchain. So now I've got some work here, and if you're not familiar with this project, it's getting a lot of attention. It's kind of an interesting project. So I'll let you do a little digging here. I like to use CoinGecko as a good place to go for just as a kind of a broad overview of what the project's about, what the market cap looks like, how long they've been around. And then if you want to dig into a little bit more, you've got some hooks here. Now, I always tell you to look for a baseline here at 50 or higher for strong projects. Now, we're just barely there. I'd like to see the development community a little bit more active, but we're pretty close. So it's worth a look at it. Come down here, look at the trading volume. Well, it's almost all to Bitcoin. It's almost all on Binance. So obviously that's what we're going to look at. Now, this is a tricky count. There's no question about it. So now clean and clear as a bell on the way up. So from our pivot low here after it hits Binance, we get a pivot to work from, and I get nice clean 5-wave. So I've got not any confusion about what I've got coming off that low. So I've got a motive wave that happens to be an impulsive wave. So I get a nice clean 5 waves into a 1. I actually think we have a truncated fifth up here, which is why I have the 1 over. So nice clean 1 wave. Now we've gone deep for the correction. All right, I think we're through. So if I pull this, I think we're through the 786 or very close to it. Come on. So if I work off my low here up to my, no, that's the absolute high. Here's what I think the truncated fifth is the high here. So we're coming up on the 786. We're not quite there. We're in between, but we've broken the 618. So if we're going that deep, that would imply a second wave, which is consistent with what we see here. So we've had the clean, clear motive wave coming off the low for our 1 wave. Well, here now this correction has been really tricky. I don't know that there's a perfect count here. This is the best count I can come up with, and it has one problem area in it. And the problem area is this little choppy zone we have here. So here's where you got to use some judgment. So I had to go all the way down to a 15-minute to try and get a count here that is workable. So if I scrunch back up in here, this is where it gets very, very tricky. Now, I actually, let me zoom in here a little bit more. So I think we have a truncated fifth here. So we get this wild wick up here. So, almost no trading volume there. This is, I don't know what that is. It's a market order, somebody getting screwed, somebody looking for a profit. Something happened there, and then we immediately come back to more normal trading range there, and then we get the last kick up. So that looks to me like it's trying to finish in a diagonal there. But I've got that as my fifth, and then I start. So with that there, so I'd cap it there. Now I may have to consider that for a fib pull or something in the future, but right now that's what I see coming from that 4 into that fifth, and then we start into a 1-2. Well, if that's my 1-2, all right, so I can see I get the move down here for my 1. Then I get my nice 3-wave 2. Right, into a double top for my 2. Well, this is where it gets tricky. Now, if that's a 1-2. Well, first I want to, if that's going to play as a 1-2, I want to see if I can catch an impulse wave in that third. Well, there's one little tell here that I'm using to kind of base this off of. So if I go 1, 2, 3, if you'll note here, well, I've got the point of control kind of getting in my way here, but you can see the yellow line. So I've wicked off the low here as the potential 1. So within the second wave, so I'm looking for my third here in white. So I'm looking for an impulse wave if I can find it. So I get 1, 2. Now the third is just ugly. There's no way around it. But this is a bit of a tell, and I'm kind of hanging my hat on this here, in that I get a perfect to the tick retracement here that does not overlap the 1. And then if I look here at this is my proposed 2 to my third. All right, we get a few ticks past the 50, but I come down here. Now I'm a little in between. Eventually they get the algo target, but I can't see another way to count this that makes sense. So I get my impulse here within my third. Now, granted, this is this is an A wave, so we could have a diagonal in here. So it's it's very hard to get a count on this, because if you allow for the impulsive wave, you got a problem here in the third. If you do it this way, so that you get a diagonal, so then we'd have 1, 2, A, B, C into the third, A, B, C into the fourth. I have to overlap the 1 for a diagonal, then I'd get A, B, C into my 5. That's the other contender here, that you're playing. So the whole thing becomes a diagonal, but you've got a diagonal in the third. You don't get a diagonal in the larger degree. You get a motive wave. So you can't. It's a bit problematic, right? There's no way to count it to give you a diagonal within a diagonal. I can get a diagonal in the third, or I can get a motive wave in the third if I come back here. So that is what I'm leaning into here. And then if I think about the fib relationship, so if this is the start of my third, and that's my one wave projected from my second here, we can see coming across here. We're shy of it here. I do qualify, get longer. So the one wave projected from the second, I do get a longer wave here, and then I've got this kind of ugly, it looks more like a diagonal 5, but I guess you can get an A, B, and then an A, B, C, D, E into, or we'd have an A, B, and then a diagonal in the C for the fourth to hold that pivot, right? So you can think of it in Elliott speak, or you can think of prior resistance. We had clear resistance here. We tapped it 1, 2, 3, 4 times. We come back up. That's the resistance here before we head down. So I have that completing the third here, A, B, C into my 4. Now looking at that, all right, as we just looked at, so that would give us in white here. So this would be the count I'd be playing. So if I put the wave on that, you can see that a little bit better. So 1, 2, problem area, 3, 4, down we go for the 5. So I don't have an easy answer for you. There's just, it's one or the other. So you have to just use a little bit of judgment here. I'm inclined to use this as my fourth to give me an impulsive wave there. But it's no question about it. It's problematic. So I understand why members wanted a review there. There's no easy answer for that. So we're going to stay with that as a completed A wave down here. That's my view of it. And then from that, so if I've completed that, well, now I do get kind of a ugly, choppy B wave, but it's there. I can get an A, a B, and then a C. Or is this A? Yeah, again, this thing is just difficult to count. So you've got A, B here, and then into a C like that. It's just, it's ugly. No clean count here. But can I get that to fit? Yeah, I can get that to fit. So let's go down. Oh, so it's either here. All right, so we've got A, B, C into the A wave, A, B, C into the B, and then we get a shallow C. We're down to 15 minutes, so it's getting tricky to get that. But I'd probably have to go down to the 5 minute to get it. But it's not, it's not critical relative to where we are. So you can think of it this way. I've just got a big box of congestion here. So that's another way to look at it. If you want to simplify, just indecision. Eventually we get the breakout heading lower, so you can do it that way. So eventually we break these lows and we start heading down. So it's, I'm counting that as an A and then my B, and then I head down in 5. Well, so if that's my B, if we allow for this count, well, then I'm looking to finish in 5. So if I, again, down here on the 15 minute, well, the 2 is a little, it ain't pretty, but I can get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into a 1. I've got this, again, it's very much like this one. It's problematic. I can get it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just not. So it would have to be A, B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into my C, so I can get an A, B, C there. It's just there's, even down here on the 15 minute, it's tough to get a count on it. That'd have to be A, B, C, B. See, it's just ugly, right? So of course, one thought is, right, if you're struggling that much to get a count on it, so one thought is, if it's that hard to read this, perhaps there's other places to consider putting money into the market. That's one thought. But if you're, a fan of this project and you like the challenge of trying to get a count here that works, I don't see, the only alternate would be to do it this way, right? So then we'd have the ABC like this. So this would be a diagonal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into an A, B, C into a B, and then we come up here to the C and we get a truncated C. I'm sure so that works also. So there's a real-time adjustment to my count based on just looking at it here. So that could play. So we've got 1, 2. Now, of course, that would be a very shallow 2 relative to the length of the 1, but there it is nonetheless. So 1, 2. So let's think about that. So if this is 1, now my 2 is very shallow. We don't even make the 38. Well, the A wave gets closer, but we get the truncated C wave, and then we head down. Well, now note here, so we go to the tick to the negative 100. We know that's going to be very close to the 1618. So that's a contender from a wave relationship, and you can probably get a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to finish my third. So digging into that, so 1, 2. I'd be looking for a tell here if that 3 is on point there. So I'm looking for my 4 somewhere in this range here. Now you can see we're tickling the Vegas wave here. So that looks to me, again, I'm down here on a 15-minute, so I'm expecting a lot of subdivision. That looks to me like I've got an A wave going in. Now, since there's been so much complexity along the way, it doesn't surprise me. So I'd be anticipating something along these lines. So this looks like I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 going in. So I'd be looking for some sort of an A wave, B, and then we come up and maybe we get the 50. That would be ideal. All right, so let's leave that parked there and bring this around here. So we'd have something like that. So an ABC here, if we get that kind of separation, I'd expect it on the 15-minute here. So then looking for one more push down to complete that. Well, if we complete down here for our 5th, and that gives us a contender for our C wave. All right, well, let's put that all into the context. So I got to go back to my 1 hour and say, well, could that work? Well, note here that certainly is deep. This prior resistance. Now, would not be that one's not relevant to any rule set here because we're long through that and past that, but it's just prior resistance potentially there for some support. Now, granted, we are going very deep for a 2, but technically, as long as we stay above this pivot, right, it's still an internal retracement. So I've wicked off some of these key levels here. This would not surprise me that there's one more push down here given what we're seeing here. So if we allow for this and kind of just draw a hot box down here. So let me get so I get, kind of this little target box down here. I call them a hot box. So we got an algo target. I've got a completed 5-wave structure that tees up. So how to trade that? Well, if you want to try and buy the falling knife, well, you can always go for something like that down there. What I will typically suggest is that rather than try and pick the bottom, let that, if it's going to bottom down there, look for a reaction. Do you get a motive wave coming off the low and then take the first retracement and then look for that to go to an external retracement? So you'd get in effect, it would be 1, 2. But you could look at it as low, higher, high, right? So potentially new trend starting. That's how I would look to trade it. I would want to see this correction complete so I get a cleaner 5 than I have in here. This just straight rip down, certainly characteristic of a 3rd. So if that rolls over one more time, I think it sets up as a potential buy. Now I would, if I'm a buyer down here, I wouldn't back the truck up there. I'd maybe 40% of whatever you might put into the project would be a first bite at it there. So, I like to say maybe an appetizer there. I might get to full entree here because at that point, then I can be very precise about what I'm doing. So if I'm buying into the 50, I know I've got my stop on the other side of that pivot. So the assumption is the pivot is in, right? Now I'm hypothetical here, right? So clearly this is just, I'm hypothesizing, but if we come down here, we get a pivot here, so it's tempting to want to try and buy the exact low, but there's no reason to do that. It's much riskier to try and nail the turn. Wait for some indication that we've got at least the ingredients for a new trend change. So we'd look for a motive wave to come out of that first move off of that low, assuming you get it. And then I'd look for 3 waves into the retracement to be the correction. And then I know that on that assumption, I should not violate that low. So I can be precise about where I'm out of the market. So I can define that risk reward, start thinking about, well, where could a 3rd wave be going? Well, I'm going to have to get through all of the resistance. We know that. So 1, 2, 3, maybe we get a 4 and a 5, and now I'm on my way. I've got a new trend established. So the reason I like to do it this way is that there's plenty of opportunity to add along the way. So why go 100% in here? You know, the thing, we don't know where that stops. It could certainly keep going. So you know, my theory is always, am I willing to try and buy the turn? Sure, but I'm not going to go heavy there. I might add, so I might put 40% on here, another 40% on here, and leave a little leave a little for a possible add if I start to like the way it's moving. So that's what I see there. That's definitely a tricky count. You got to make some judgment calls up here about what's actually happening there. But you know, in the broader picture, I got to pivot low, I got to pivot high. Are we still internal? We're still internal. So this correction's still ongoing. I haven't finished in a 5. I've got a good candidate for a third. One more rip down, now I'll be looking for the long side. Until then, I don't know why you'd be a buyer here. It's just this. It's not. I mean, so you could be trading from the 3rd into the 4th. So for more of a scalp trade, there's probably something there, but anticipating there's likely one more rollover. Not guaranteed, but probabilities. The probability is there's likely one more kick down. So that's what I see there. All right, guys, that'll wrap it for that coin. That was a tricky one. Took me a while to get a count on that. All right, I got a couple more to share with you today. I'll be back in a little while.